District by Commissioner Rodney Ellis, who also represents much of Harris County, a large part of Harris County, and of course our Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, with an array of very important people, both the deputy sheriffs and representatives from Houston Police Department, who every day confront something that they wish they did not. Combined are the first responders of healers, and that is our doctors, who in fact are persons that have to see the aftermath or hopefully intervene. But I want to start with the deadliness of guns and domestic violence incidents. 204 people killed by intimate partners in 2021. 228 were killed in 2020. The decrease does not give me comfort. It does not give me comfort. If one woman, one person in a domestic violence incident remains injured severely or dead, then we have not done our job. We fight every day, but lives are lost. I just want to take a moment because, as the officers know, I've been struck by this one case that occurred in the last 72 hours. And I mourn for this young woman, 38-year-old Myra, who is a mother. On September 14th, she went to the apartment, Chacon's apartment, to visit their 5-month-old daughter. She reported that he grabbed her by her hair and dragged her through the apartment. She added that he had assaulted her several times in the past. This is the life of many victims of domestic violence every single day. He even tried to falsely charge her with driving around with the 5-month-old baby that she obviously loved while she was intoxicated. All proven untrue. He couldn't stop there. I don't know why, but he could not stop there. And so, on Monday, witnesses saw him force his ex-girlfriend, Myra Gutierrez, at gunpoint into her own SUV outside of his apartment in Pasadena, court documents say. They also say Gutierrez went to the apartment to visit their 5-month-old daughter at that time. You can't extinguish a mother's love for her child. Later that day, the mother of 4 was found shot to death inside her SUV in Southeast Houston. Not beat to death, that could happen. Not stabbed to death, it could happen. Not thrown in front of a car, it could happen. But shot to death, the weapon of choice of domestic violence incidences, which puts in jeopardy our medical professionals and certainly our first responders. We are gathered here today, if you will. I could not let the combination of the toxicity of guns and this month, where we speak to women, speak to families, try to save their lives, try to find a way for them to leave if they are in jeopardy. In this instance, it was a mother's love that caused her death. I know it, and to this family I mourn, and we stand here today offering our deepest sympathy. We know that she wanted to see that baby, and she is now dead, and her children are without a mother. As the chair of the Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security Committee, I was driven to file and introduce H.R. 1620, the Violence Against Women Act, Reauthorization Act. The origins of that bill is all about domestic violence. It is, of course, a combination of assault, rape, DNA kits, cultural training as to how to deal with women, but its very underpinnings, when I came to the United States Congress, had started with the advocacy of the victims of domestic violence who went to the United States Congress and indicated we have to have some relief. We have to have resources for centers like the Houston Area Women's Center and the center in Montgomery County. We have to have relief for victims, survivors, Because domestic violence is terrifying. It is a terrifying crime perpetrated by those who garnered the trust of their partners and then violated their trust in the most immoral, inhumane way. Trust is the basic foundation on which a relationship is built. So to infringe on that vulnerability by harming one's partner is inexcusable and repulsive, but more importantly, partners are caught by surprise. They're beat up, and in their own mind they say, he or she is not going to kill me. They're not going to use a gun against me. I've got to stay here. I've taken calls late at night. I've called Emily Whitehurst with victims on the phone, or people that are my constituents, or trying to get them out and looking for a place. And it's not 12 noon. It's usually 11, 12 o'clock, 1 a.m. in the morning. And so as I championed this legislation in Washington, and the bill ultimately passed as a consolidated part of the appropriations bill, we were able to at least provide the resources necessary for a women's center around America to receive millions of dollars to be able to finally get back to work on dealing with the gun violence and domestic violence together. That's why we're here today. Because the guns you see in front of us are guns taken off the street by the sheriff's department, these deputy sheriffs, Sheriff Gonzalez. And I'm sure if we traveled to where they were stored, you would see eons of such. But the work is not yet finished. We're standing here because we want to really pinpoint, we want to focus, we want you to look at these guns, we want you to see that these guns are on the street and these guns can kill and they're intimidating women, and that's why this young woman, 38 years old, is dead and her children don't have her today. She is dead, and there are others. And so in the legislation that I wrote, we put in the provisions that if you're an abuser, you don't get to be able to have a gun. Bill became more narrow. So today as I stand here advocating for gun buybacks, taking guns off the street, I'm also going to be introducing legislation to fully close the boyfriend loophole by expanding the definition, including more situations, even like stalking. Because if you're a stalker and you've been told to stay away, or there's an order, you haven't abused, but you have stalked and you've threatened, you don't need to have a gun, because we'll show you these guns can get you from across the street or shoot into your window. I believe it is crucial that we honor those. And as I close, let me say, the victims of domestic violence should not be forgotten. And the guns that are evidence should not be ignored. I want to acknowledge Brittany Smith of Houston, who was 23 years old when she was shot by her boyfriend. Not stabbed, shot. We cannot forget Yashika Fontenot, who was gunned down in Harris County for trying to escape an abusive relationship. Please do not stay to that point. We need more women's centers, housing for people. In my legislation, we had the provision for the victim to stay in the home and the abuser have to go. Many times, the victim has no place to go. It's the abuser's apartment, it's the abuser's home. They're on the deed, they're on the lease, and the victim has nowhere to go. And so, we came today, we could not let the week end, the first week of honoring domestic violence victims. Yes, I'm honoring them, I'm mourning them. I'm outraged about it. And these guns are killing. As a member of the Gun Task Force, as the Vice Chair, two things we're doing right now, Commissioner. We're insisting that ghost guns, that the Attorney General looks to insist that these guns be registered or off the street, that you can't run around with ghost guns. The other thing is that we're going to give for the officers, as you well know, there is now a new provision to give gun retailers a code so that when you use your credit card to buy a gun, you officers can trace it. And Mr. Jones has gone in with a credit card, I don't know who would do that, but going in with the credit card and bought up 20 of them because a gun retailer is selling guns. You need to know, if necessary, how to trace that. And every store, every retailer has a code. The gun dealers didn't. we now have given them a code. I just for a moment, and I'm going to yield to the commissioner. Commissioner, just come out for a moment. Come out for a moment over here, and I will yield to you. Sergeant, if you would come, so the people can understand.
You don't mind me not getting too close.
Yeah, that's fine. Understand what this sounds like. This and this was taken off the street.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, go right ahead.
So this is a 12-gauge shotgun, and like I was speaking to a congresswoman earlier, this is like universal sound that anytime somebody has a 12-gauge shotgun, they're racking it. They're all completely loaded. There's no ammunition here. So here we go.
Unloaded. Unloaded. Unloaded.
So every time you fire, it comes out.
I'm going to show you the other one, and then we'll go over here. You want to show us? These two were held by a domestic violent perpetrator. These were used or could be used in a domestic violence incident. They look small. They look smaller. But I'm going to let Sergeant pick them up, and then I'm going to take them from him. This one in particular looks like nothing can happen to it. You can't do anything with it. Sergeant, show them how you can hide it.
This is a 380. You can walk. You can hide this in the palm of your hand. You can stick it in the pocket. Walk into a store, restaurant. Can't tell I have anything in my pocket.
Or walk into your home.
Walk into your home. You're sitting there talking to somebody. You could be standing here talking the entire time like I have a gun in my hand and you don't even know. And this can kill just like any one of these can.
Yes, as small as a phone.
Yes.
He indicated that I had a pocket that I didn't know. Way around. Anybody can have something like this in an argument, and all of a sudden you wind up dead. And I think one of the things is, Commissioner, a little one like this, it's placement of the bullet. So if it goes to your heart or it hits you in the head or a vital organ, you're as dead as if you had the AR-15. Domestic violence, subject to guns like this. Commissioner, I'm delighted that you're here, and I'm going to yield to you at this time.
Thank you, Carter. I'm just curious, is this one where with technology they can turn it into automatic, Sheriff? So the deal I saw where you can go online and figure out how to and do the switch? Even one that small? Clearly on that small.
Yes,
Yes, we have a big one for sure.
Yeah.
We covered one today.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the Congresswoman for pulling us all together, the sheriff and his team for being here and putting a face on the problem. Ms. Whitehurst and obviously our folks in the medical community. I know this is Suicide Prevention Month. I appreciate the Congresswoman, her leadership, and her colleagues. I appreciate all of them in Congress, particularly the ones like Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Al Green, Sylvia Garcia, Lizzie Fletcher, who voted for the funds that we are using, both the city and the county, to do another gun buyback. This will be the second one. It is federal money. $1 million from the city, $1 million from the county. This will be the second one inside the city limits. We're working with the sheriff. We're going to do some in unincorporated as well. It's amazing how when we talk about crime, people are willing to speculate and talk about all of the various reasons for crime. But there's a reluctance to talk about the most common denominator in most, not all, but in most violent crimes, particularly when they lead to a murder, and that is a gun.
Right there.
There may be instances where someone would strangle someone to death or do something else or push them off of a building, but the most common denominator with a murder would be a gun. Over the past couple of years since the pandemic, state, county, and national folks have experienced alarming rises in domestic violence, largely brought about in part because of the pandemic. All of us have to work together to eliminate this crisis. We can't fully address the crisis of domestic violence unless we address the crisis of gun violence. The relationship between guns and domestic violence cannot be ignored. In Texas in 2020, 79% of intimate partner gun homicides were women, according to Everytown USA. According to the Texas Council on Family Violence, there were more domestic homicides in 2020 in Texas than in the past 2 decades. Nearly 2/3 of the victims were killed with a gun, and Harris County had the most homicides. Finally, 2/3 of mass shootings have been linked to domestic and family violence in a nationwide study by Johns Hopkins. These are troubling numbers that demand our attention. But we can't speak frankly about this problem unless we talk about guns. Obviously, this is also National Suicide Month, where we're focusing on people who use guns and end up committing suicide. Women of color and others who are marginalized by income, status, identity, ability are especially at risk. It's also vital that we call on our state leaders to join this effort. In Texas, just think about the logic. Knowing that guns are a problem, what happens in Texas? They make it easy for anybody to get a gun. Even somebody under 21 to get a weapon of mass destruction. And they don't have to go to a computer to tinker with a handgun. They can get it when you're 18 in Texas. That's why we're having another gun buyback this weekend. The mayor and I chatted a little earlier. Congresswoman and I appreciated his efforts on this. We learning lessons each time we do one of these. So this go around, no ghost guns. The mayor mentioned a short while ago, I was at his office, that somebody called in and said they had over 100 guns they wanted to bring. We're going to limit how many you can bring. He's put them in touch with law enforcement people if they want to do that, but we don't want to create a ruckus with somebody showing up with 100 guns. When we had the event at Wheeler Avenue, we were not prepared, quite frankly, for that large of a crowd. People got there at 6 a.m. It started at 8. We were supposed to stop at noon. We closed it at 5. We ran out of gift cards to give people. So this go around, I hope we surpass the most successful gun buyback I've heard about in the country. One day it was Tampa. I think Tampa had slightly under 1,000, maybe 950 or something like that. I saw a press release where Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, from her gun buyback statistics that she's hosted since she's been in office, they've removed nearly 3,500 guns out of the state of New York. Everything's big in Texas, including this gun epidemic. A culture where people think it's good for everybody to have a gun. The Congresswoman and I have cited the statistics many times. More guns in America than there are people. In fact, more people in America own guns than any other country on the face of the planet. Roughly 120 guns for every 100 people in America. That's why we're hoping that the media will do what they did the first go around. We know that that event was successful in large part because you all put the word out. This go around at a Metro Park and Ride, I don't think we'll have problems with processing it much more rapidly this go around. We had problems last go around. I think we're perfecting that. Last point I want to make is, the last time a mayor had a gun buyback program, to my knowledge, in Houston, was when Lee Brown was either mayor or police chief. If he was police chief, it was Kathy Whitmire. If not, it may have been when he was mayor. First city in America, as I said, was Philadelphia. We're learning. We're using the best practices that people have used around the country. One of those practices is no questions asked. I trust law enforcement. Chief Fenner and his team designed the first one. I'm going to trust them on what it takes to go and be successful in one of these events. So Congresswoman, thank you, and thank you for bringing so many experts here to put a face on this problem. I think we're better than what we have shown in Texas. So we're doing our part with federal money from you all to ask people, bring the guns in. And if we only get one tomorrow. If we just get one gun, I'll go to bed tomorrow night feeling like we've done our job. Because that'll be one gun where someone won't end up killing themselves or someone else. Thank you.
Commissioner Levy, thank you very much. You know, you can send federal dollars to local jurisdictions, and it's a question of what kind of custodian or guardian they are. Both the mayor and Commissioner Ellis have made us proud because they have been unafraid to fight against the scourge of guns and the devastation on our families, including women who are most the victim of domestic violence. And we should add that now the #1 killer of children are homicides by guns. They are the victims. And if you have ever had a chance, tragically, to visit with families of children who died by gunfire, many in this community, or the Uvalde families, your heart stays broken for a very long time. And so I'm going to say tomorrow, I want standing room only, car room only. I want enough cars to create a little traffic jam because this is an effective and important way to try to continue to help our law enforcement and to help victims. Guns do not create victimless crimes. With a gun, there's going to be a victim. And in domestic violence, that victim may wind up dead. And I'm here fighting mad, fussing mad, because you're going to hear from these doctors and police and the sheriff. And Sheriff, as I indicated to your team here that I'm so proud of, with HPD has done a buyback. We know we can work with the Sheriff's Department, with all of your legal expertise, and when I say law enforcement expertise, and go out to our friends in the county and do a great one. And I'm glad to hear what the sheriff just said. That's exciting. And I will take this moment now to introduce Sheriff Ed Gonzalez. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you so much. You've already met my team member, Sergeant White. Also, Major Whitaker is with me, Deputy Escobar, and Monica as well with Constable May Walker's office, our team members at Precinct 7 Constable's office. This October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we pause to mourn those that have lost their lives to domestic violence. We also honor those that have been able to survive incidents of domestic violence. But we all stand united in the constant fight against domestic violence. Domestic violence is wrong, it's illegal, it's a scourge in communities across the country. And Congresswoman, I thank you for championing this effort. I commend you for seeking to end the boyfriend loophole. These situations are a matter of life and death. I personally responded to them. I personally have been on scenes where someone lost their life and seeing the aftermath with the children that are now left without a mother most times, and other family members hearing their cries in the middle of the night where it's their worst moment. You heard Sergeant White rack that shotgun.
Yeah.
I paused for just a moment and I asked you to do the same. How many women was that the last sound they heard as they took their last breath? How many?
Powerful.
That's why we're here today, because we must put a stop to that. Just a couple examples. First case, a couple divorced and the wife moved out with their children. Issues with child custody remain at the forefront with this couple, and a court appearance was pending. The ex-husband confronted his ex-wife, shot her several times in the torso before he fled the home. Remarkably, she survived her injuries and was able to identify her attacker. The ex-husband would later be charged and arrested. The second case, I went to myself. A husband and wife who were separated and also having child custody issues. The estranged husband had made a threat against his wife through another family member. Eventually, the estranged husband killed his wife, child, and a family member before turning the gun on himself. Recently, again, regarding child custody, during a child exchange, the ex-husband and ex-wife were involved in a verbal dispute. The ex-husband attempted to leave with the children who were in his vehicle. While attempted to enter his vehicle, he was shot at least once in the back by his ex-wife before being able to flee the scene. The ex-wife was subsequently charged. And you heard Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee just lay out the scenario most recently, and our hearts go out to the victim from Pasadena, where again, allegedly she was kidnapped. We've seen that many times, and stalking cases are going up, and we're finding where technology is being used to track their intimate partners so that they could follow them, then assault them, they intimidate them, they're just after them, and eventually these situations can be deadly. We're seeing also an uptick in more strangulation cases, and we know that those are very, very lethal type situations. This is an array of weapons that we see. They do tend to be the weapon of choice because they're readily available. Many times they're either on their person because they're small enough to conceal, or they could easily go to another room, get it, retrieve it, and come back. Tensions are already high. Sometimes there's a lot of issues going on. The dynamics are very dangerous. Our deputies have to respond when weapons are involved and make those split-second decisions when there's also kids involved. This is an awful, terrible situation. We must all put a stop to it, because beyond something that we hardly ever talk about is those children, Congresswoman, that are in the household that now, if it turned deadly, now are without a parent. Two as well, because hopefully the offender will go to prison for the rest of their life. Another thing, we need to make sure we're holding them accountable. Yes. But also now, even if the parent survives, these children have to be in school. They have to listen to that trauma. They have to listen to those dynamics, those screams of the violence that's going on in the household. And guess what? They're likely to become the future abusers of tomorrow. Those little girls that are growing up in the household will become, and that's the example they have of what it's an unhealthy marriage and relationship, but to them, that's the only type of relationship that they know. They will grow up dating abusers as well. And so these are all situations that we must stop these cycles from happening. And so I commend you, Congresswoman, for leading the charge on this. And I'll just close with this, is that, and I'll refer to my friend's t-shirt over here that she's in the back. We the people are pissed off. Stop domestic violence. We are pissed off. And so thank you for convening us. Thank you for using your voice, Congresswoman, to raising this information, not only right now, this Domestic Violence Month, for always being a champion and seeking resources for the Houston Area Women's Center, for Family Time up in North Harris County, and every other provider that's here, the doctor as well, everybody that's fighting this fight. Because in addition to mourning and remembering those that we've lost, it's also this month about connecting the social network, the providers that are out there fighting the good fight every day, and making sure that we're connecting resources and that they have what's necessary to help people get out of these situations. Thank you. Oh, briefly in Spanish, quiero agradecer a la congresista por unirnos hoy. Estamos aquí anunciando el peligro que existen en estos casos con estas armas que vieron mostradas. Parece ser que en estas situaciones de violencia doméstica son las armas las que son más utilizadas y sabemos que puede ser fatal. Hemos visto ejemplos aquí recientemente en nuestra comunidad donde se ha utilizado una arma. Entonces estamos levantando la conciencia en este mes de octubre, el mes de levantar la conciencia sobre violencia doméstica, y estamos todos unidos para combatir esto, y también darle gracias a la congresista por sus esfuerzos a nivel nacional para traer leyes que son más potentes. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Let me just quickly say to you that this is the 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun. That sound may be the last sound. Sheriff, thank you so very much. Next to it, that's a 12-gauge shotgun, the big long one. Next to it is a sawed-off shotgun with a pistol grip. Next to it is a .44 Magnum revolver that's called the Dirty Harry. This is the one that we think should only be in movies. Look how deadly looking that is. And then right next to it, of course, is a 9mm Smith & Wesson. Domestic violence abuser had that gun. A Ruger 380. Both of these guns a domestic violence abuser had. Both of them. And then there's nothing to say about an AR-15. Nothing to say about it. It speaks for itself. It is an horrific, heinous, violent, destructive, deadly weapon to be used in war. And to all the deputy sheriffs, Escobar, Major Whitaker, and Sergeant White, we appreciate all your team and sheriff. And I think that's good news. The sheriff says he's going to work with us and work with you, Commissioner, and save a little bit of those federal dollars. And I would greatly appreciate it. We want to hear from our medical team, and we're going to run our medical team, and not because they're not important, but because we want to make sure they get heard. We want them to be heard. We're delighted, not that he has the kind of work he has, but we're delighted with his expertise to save lives. We all know Ben Taub, and the head of Chief and the Trauma Center, and anyone knows that Ben Taub still remains as will be a partner in the medical center to other emergency rooms to be able to take the worst, and he sees gunshot wounds. Again, I want to emphasize to you, we have a rise in the killing of children by guns. And those little bodies that take a gunshot are far different from an adult. Having been in the United States Congress, I know the story of Sandy Hook and what the remains were. And now, how many years later, I know the story of Uvalde and what happened. Doctor, would you?
Thank you. It's really an honor to hear what's going on in the community. My name is Chad Wilson. I am the Trauma Medical Director of Ben Taub's Trauma Center. I'm an Associate Professor of Surgery at the Baylor College of Medicine. And people are probably focused on the part of my job that seems exciting, right? Someone gets shot, and it's my job to try to save them, and that is usually what people focus on. But it's very encouraging to hear what's happening here today, because the part of my job that I actually find challenging is not being a surgeon, but it's being an academic, and it's being an epidemiologist to ask questions, very hard questions. And the question that I ask a lot of times is, why is it that one community has so much more gun violence than another community? So I'm originally from Missouri City. I actually was born at St. Luke's, and my mother worked at Ben Taub, so I'm from this community. But my job before I was here was in New York City at Bellevue Hospital, a county hospital, and I guarantee you I saw a fraction of the gun violence in that hospital that I see here. And as an epidemiologist, I wonder, why is there a different prevalence? And I want to study that. And we try to study that. There's a lot of barriers to studying that, as you probably are aware of with the Dickey Amendment. But we're now actually able to do that now and try to answer these questions. And as we try to answer those questions, we want to understand, why is one community protected and one community is so injured? So when you hear about this buyback program, this is something we can do to change the community, to make this community more like a community that's seeing less gun violence. So that's why I'm encouraged to be here, to hear that, you know, I'm not alone in this fight at 2 in.the morning trying to fix the holes in the aorta, to hear that people at every level are understanding, why can't we get to the root of this problem instead of waiting for Dr. Wilson to try to fix the mess that remains after the shots have already been fired. So thank you so much. It was a privilege to be here and to hear all of this positive work around gun violence.
Well, Doctor, I'm not going to let you go
Yes, ma'am.
real quickly, because I'm going to alternate between one of the advocates and the doctor, and Dr. Brown will be next. But you have to describe that experience in surgery of what a gunshot does to a human body. What is the extent of what people don't see? They come in, that wound is there. Please, we need to hear it. And the costliness of that gun wound, as you can perceive it from the medical perspective. But
Well, you know, you'd be surprised if I answered with that. I think the things we see on TV depict how ugly it is to see blood splattered and to see injuries. So if you watch TV, you see the ugliness of violence. For me, the human body is beautiful, and when I open the human body and I see the bullet holes, it's very it's an elegant thing. It's an honor. It's a privilege to see the beating heart. And I love that. I love to be there and to fix those injuries. The part that is devastating for me is not that. I see those holes and I want to fix them. The part is when I am unsuccessful. And I have to go into that room and I have to tell that person who's come to the hospital with hope. They're hoping that their loved one is okay. And I'm the person who takes that hope away. And I can tell you that's the most traumatic thing that I do as a doctor. I walk in and I say, there is no hope. He's gone. She's gone. The bullet holes there, to me, they just look like, it's like a mechanic looking at a car. I can fix that. But when I can't fix it anymore, I have to go talk to the family. And I think everybody can understand that. That's the part of my job that hurts. It's the part of my job that's going to make me want to retire early, because it's the part that makes me want to run home and hug my babies and just say, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's why I'm so excited to hear that we're trying to change this community. So maybe I can have a call night. This is a little more quiet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Pleasant,
I want-
HPD, Houston Police Department.
Yes, Victim Services Division, I want to thank Congresswoman and Commissioner and all the dignitaries and all of my partners here. I am co-founder of the Domestic Abuse Response Team. It's an innovative solution to domestic violence response. You have a partner, we have an officer and a advocate who is partnered. They'll respond to a scene after the primary unit has taken care of the law enforcement side of everything. They do an on-site needs and safety assessment. The next thing they will do is provide not the cookie cutter response, which is to hand them a victim rights card and tell them, okay, here you navigate the system. But it is actually to sit down with that victim and customize the response that they need to the criminal justice services and our partners that I am so fortunate to have, because Dr. Wilson, you're not alone. We are responding to those scenes at 3 a.m. and we are engaging with our partners to find housing. Sadly, sometimes my teams that are out there report back there is no housing, there is no bed. A week ago, we had a family of 6 children, 11, 8, 6, 2 and 2 twin 1-year-olds. The female finally got the courage to leave the home, walked into one of our police departments, and there was no housing available. When you have 6 children and a mother, you have to have, my nonprofits are one, yes, a whole room of beds available. That is hard to find on a weekend. So then I get a phone call and I'm talking to directors of emergency services to say, hey, my officer paid for a hotel the first night. Now the hotel has evicted the entire family in the Houston heat. Can we please do something for this family? In the meantime, we send a unit over so they can sit in a car and have some coverage, some air. So these are very real situations. We are in them weekly. We have a crisis, but it is up to not just our partners that you always, these are our same partners, Commissioner, HPD, Congresswoman is an advocate for legislature and VAWA and getting our funding for our partners, for our law enforcement. So my heart goes out to you and thank you for our chief and mayor for seeing the crisis that we're in. But finally, I think that we're gaining a little ground with programs like DARTS, and we can start building that trust and saying we really can partner for a collaborative response, and that is with our businesses, our profits, nonprofits, service providers, government agencies, because it's the only way that public safety is going to become our collective problem and our collective solution. So thank you for having me here, and thank you for everyone that is here to stay engaged with our fight during domestic violence awareness and bringing attention to some of the solutions we have for them.
Okay, thank you. If it was not for these officers, Deputy Sheriff's Lieutenant and Lieutenant Cloud from HPD, we would not, and Sergeant, who I'm going to bring forward in a moment, we would lose more lives. Because if that parent, woman stayed in a house with 6 children and there's access, and let me just say this, there's unlimited access to guns in Texas. There's unlimited. We hit the national news when a law came out of permitless carry. We had open carry, then we went to permitless carry. And the young man that bought the AR-15 in Uvalde bought it within minutes. I think he had a day in between, went back and picked it up. The minute he picked it up, he was en route to Robb Elementary School. Those are children. That is equal to a domestic incident and a mass murder. Children are now the #1 killer of children is homicide, and the #1 weapon of choice is a gun. And mixed in with those children is, in many instances, a woman. And what is happening is now the children are being killed as well. So I have worked with Emily Whitehurst, the head of the Houston Area Women's Center, for her entire tenure. And I've worked with the Houston Area Women's Center for more decades than I can remember as a member of the board some years ago. And it is a lifeline. But I know that the screams that come across the phones that they have to answer are screams that we would not want to hear, or screams that many people have not heard. We are desperate for the peace of mind that the doctor has spoken of, that at least we will not result in a shooting or death of the victim before we can get them help. And that's what we see. Emily Whitehurst. Excuse me.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Congresswoman, Sheriff, Commissioner. Thank you. Yeah. And all the other advocates, allies, frontline workers, thank you for being here on a Friday afternoon to do what I am so grateful to have the opportunity to do, which is to make the connections between gun violence and domestic violence and mass shootings. The Houston Area Women's Center believes in a future defined by safe communities, caring families, and healthy relationships. We're on a mission to make that happen. The Houston Area Women's Center, HAWK, serves thousands of women, children, and families each year who are escaping domestic violence, sexual assault, and trafficking. We help survivors transform their lives free from violence. And it is because of their courage that we are convinced this crisis can and must be stopped. This month, and even today, you hear horrible stories and horrible statistics, but I want to center the courage of the survivors who right now are managing the risk, minimizing the anger, and doing everything they can to stay safe. We know that their courage warrants our collective response. They're doing their part, we have to do ours. What you may not know about the Houston Area Women's Center is that in working to end domestic violence, we are also working on the front lines of the gun violence epidemic. As you've heard today, there is an inextricable link between gun violence, domestic violence, and mass shootings. Where there is a history of domestic or family violence and there is a gun in a home, a victim is 5 times more likely to die. Gun violence accounts for 2/3 of all domestic violence-related murders. And while we may have seen a slight dip in 2021, we are not convinced that that trend is directionally where we want it to go. When victims call our hotline, and in 2021 we managed over 50,000 calls more than ever before, one of the most important questions we ask people when they call is whether their abuser has access to a firearm. When we develop safety plans, we strategize with them to know, where are the guns stored? If they're stored, are they stored safely? Are the guns locked? We help them develop a plan for escape for themselves and their children should their abuser go for a gun. Can you imagine being on a phone with somebody who's calling you in fear of their lives and trying to figure out how to escape one of these? It's unconscionable. 1 in 3 of all Hawk clients are children. As Congresswoman said, gun violence is now the leading cause of death for children. Many of those are in domestic violence situations. This is the definition of a public health crisis. It's predictable and it's preventable. Did you know that as many as 60% of mass shootings were domestic violence attacks or were committed by someone with a history of domestic violence? We're on the front lines of that. We're answering those calls. And every time we're able to safety plan and help someone escape, we're preventing potentially a shooting, a mass shooting. 100% of family members, friends, and bystanders who were killed, not the victim, but the bystanders, 100% of them who were killed in a domestic violence incident were killed by a firearm. So we are all getting potentially victimized. If you are thinking domestic violence is not your problem, you are sadly mistaken.
Sadly.
And so as we grieve, we must also act. There are solutions. As an agency who has been on the front lines for 45 years, I'm here to tell you real-time safety makes a difference. We should not be in a situation where a mother of 6 who finally has summoned the courage to leave has nowhere to go. That's just not right. She's done her part. We haven't done ours. Let's change that. Let's make sure this community provides real-time safety to anybody who knows they're in danger and who wants to leave. Let's do that. Let's do it today. Let's not stop for a second until that's done. We know it works. And then when it comes to guns, let's close that boyfriend loophole. We're in the 21st, which 12 years is now? 2022?
2022.
People who are getting shot are not necessarily married. Hello? It's time to move on from that old notion and tell everybody that if you've got a record of abuse, you don't get a gun. That's reasonable. We're talking about common sense safety measures. Safe storage. If somebody's got a protective order, get that gun away. Just take it away. It's a little bit logistically complicated, I understand, but it's got to be done. Again, if somebody has gone to the effort to say, I am in danger, and the court agrees, let's get their gun. It just needs to be done. So I'm so happy to be here with everybody on a Friday afternoon. We are not going to stop until this situation is resolved, and the reason why is because survivors are doing their part, and we need to do ours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Dr. Tish Rowe has established an important medical clinic in the Third Ward area and has seen from her early years of practice gunshot wounds, but also the devastation on families. Dr. Tish Rowe, thank you so very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, for the opportunity to be here and speak. Thank you to the sheriff. Thank you, Commissioner Ellis, for this opportunity. As a primary care physician, I echo the sentiments of everyone who has already spoken, but I really want to emphasize to you all, if she got 50,000 calls in a year, there are probably 500,000 women who have experienced domestic violence. I know this for a fact because when I see victims of domestic violence, I have to beg them to seek help. These women are not picking up the phone overnight, and we say women because that's the majority. It takes a really long time to get the courage to ask for help and to find then that there are no resources, which then puts them back in the same situation, and now they seriously fear their lives because they have taken the step to ask for help, and if the abuser finds that out, they're going to threaten to kill them. My patients say that to me repeatedly. If I leave, he will kill me. And we cannot afford for people to be in a situation where they have no way out. I also want to speak to what he said about there being more violence in certain communities. I challenge us as a community to stop being silent about domestic violence and challenge family members to not protect abusers. for fear of the consequences they will face if these amazing officers who are here to help, because they can't help if no one calls, because the victim is being threatened and intimidated that if they call, they're going to hurt the abuser. We have to stop that. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee can't change that. She can work on the laws, but we as a community have to work on the way that we handle domestic violence. And that being said, it takes time for laws to change. But when you know that your sister, your mother, your aunt, they're being abused, if you won't open your home to them, then if they die with no shelters, what happens then? And if you know that someone you love, right, because abusers, they're family members too, has access to a gun, and you have not had that conversation with them, they can voluntarily give it up. They can go to the event tomorrow and turn it in. If you know that they have hit people before, whether they've been charged or not charged, you owe it to yourself, if you love the person they have abused, to ask them to give up the gun. I speak to this as a physician, but also as an individual who has dealt with domestic violence personally, who has found out that a friend is dead by asking others why they haven't answered their phone, and finding out that, oh, you didn't hear, Carmen's dead. And the sad part is Carmen, who's here from Houston, exited an abusive relationship, wrote a book about domestic violence, and then was killed by her husband, right? So we have a lot of work to do. We cannot put it all on Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. She has her hands full. She's tackling a lot of things. We really have to get back to our roots of how we handle things as a community. The officers need to know who did it. The officers need to be called, and people need to be held accountable. If they have to spend a day in jail, a year in jail, or repeatedly in jail, it's worth it so that no one dies. If they've abused 10 women and had no accountability, then when that 11th woman dies, that blood is on our hands. So thank you, Congresswoman, for the opportunity to be here. This is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart, and I just want to thank everybody in the room for caring, because it's very easy to turn a blind eye when it doesn't affect you until one day it finally affects you.
I want to thank the media, and I want them to just continue and following this. We have dynamic people that must be heard. I do want to say that I really want full participation. I want lines to be out for the gun buyback, and the reason why I'm glad that law enforcement is here, they're too modest because they're law enforcement, they do their job, but domestic violence calls are some of the most dangerous calls that officers can make. You have a combination of a frightened victim, you have someone else who is terrorizing or either out of his mind or her mind, and they have a deadly weapon. And I want to remind people, I want to remind the officers, remember there were 2 officers killed in New York, young men, NYPD, and it was a domestic violence call, and it was a mother, an elderly person. And the individuals were held up, or the individual was held up in a room in the back, and shot through the door and killed 2 officers on a domestic violence call. I'd like for you to understand the psychological impact. Dr. Guion, of the Clinical Research and Practice Associates, I thank him for being here, and we're going to ask all of our speakers so that we can get everyone to get their pointed point. So thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I also like to thank Sheriff Gonzalez, Commissioner Ellis. All due respect to the law enforcement and my colleagues, I want to just speak briefly about an element that I have found in the course of my work. I'm a retired college professor and now have started my own business. But throughout that time, I've worked a lot with individuals who suffered with symptoms of mental illness and substance use disorder, and the role that that plays in the violence and the shooting and those kind of things that take place. I think I find it nothing more scarier than a drug-induced psychotic individual with a gun. That's dangerous, and I've sat before them doing the work, and while they were under the influence, or perhaps while they were having their psychotic episode, their reality is totally distorted. They're seeing things and hearing things. They think that what's happening is not really happening, and then they're angry because they can't get a gun. I acknowledge what the Congresswoman said, which was very disturbing to me. Whereas anyone can get a gun without a permit in Texas, and I see those that are doing that, and they have this history of mental illness and substance abuse, and for many of them, their reality is distorted. Now, let me make a caveat. It's not to say that everybody who has mental illness and everybody who has a substance abuse problem is violent, but what we do see that there is that role that plays, that is played, with these individuals. So I appreciate what the Congresswoman is doing. I'm a resident of the 18th Congressional District, have been a supporter of her for 27 years you've been in Congress? So from the very onset. Yeah, so I just wanted to share those thoughts. I see there's seem to be more of an awareness in our community now to address mental health concerns. And I'm excited about that because that's always one of those things that we don't want to talk a whole lot about. But it's very real, and it's encouraging also to see how many high-profile celebrities, athletes, who are acknowledging the importance of good mental health, among individuals. So, with continued effort and continued support, we're going to address these concerns, particularly with those people who suffer with those symptoms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We want to make sure that we get time for questions, and I want the sheriff to be part of the questions that are coming. So I'd like Sergeant Bilbo.
Yes.
With Constable May Walker's office, Precinct 7. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for dealing with domestic violence. And I'll have you offer a word. I think that then we will be able to, and I want to make sure I introduce you.
Hello to all. I am Sergeant Monica Bilbo. I am with Harris County Precinct 7. I am a domestic violence sergeant. I've been in this role for a little over 13 years. And as they were speaking, I was reminded of a particular incident that occurred several months ago where I made a scene where we had a young lady who was running from her perpetrator, who was her boyfriend as well. They were living together and had a 1-month-old. And when I arrived at the scene, she was hiding underneath her manager's desk from her perpetrator, boyfriend, slash lived-in boyfriend. When we arrived at the original location, we were able to apprehend him. But in that particular residence where they were, there were 8 guns, many of what you're seeing here in that. 8 weapons, may I say loaded weapons, in that residence that he could have used at any time, with a young child in that residence as well. So I am elated to be here and to see there are so many organizations that are here that are partnering together so that we can do our part in putting a face to domestic violence. This is so important. If I had to speak to anyone, I want to speak to the victim, because many times the perpetrator wants that victim to believe she's alone. She doesn't have anybody else. She does not have any resources. But as you can see here today, with so many people represented, the Sheriff Department, Houston Police Department, the Constable's Office, we are here. The victim is not alone. We want them to take advantage of this. We were able to put that perpetrator in jail. Congresswoman, I was actually going to file another report, a 2B warrant on another domestic violence suspect And that particular suspect met me on the streets and was out the next day. And he said to me, I told you I would be out. And I said to him, and I will be back. So we are here, we care, we are partnering together so that you will know victims, survivors, I like to say, are not alone. We are here for you. We are in the community. The constable's office, Harris County Precinct 7, we are tirelessly working. We will get up at the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock hour to make sure our victims are safe, to make sure that our victims are out of that situation. We are located at 5290 Greek, so we service the southeast area of Houston, but we will work anywhere. I've worked with the Houston Police Department getting some of their files. I'll take it if it means I can get that perpetrator off the street and alleviate some of the load that Houston Police Department has with their domestic violence units, and they're doing an outstanding job. We will do that. We will work. We don't care what area of town you are in. We particularly service the Southeast, but we do not care. We're here for that survivor. We're here for that victim. So thank you. Thank you so much for allowing us to be a part of this. And thank you for being, thank you so much.
We are very honored to have your work, and I do want to make sure I acknowledge again, Family Time Crisis and Counseling. This is Clarissa, and you are located
in Humble, but we service the greater Houston area.
But I want it to be known, you're located in Humble, so we've got people from all over, and we're honored. Please, would you come forward and just say a brief word so we can get to questions and be able to thank everybody who was here. Thank you for your 25 years. Thank you. We want to put you out of business, like all of us.
That's right.
Yeah.
And speaking of putting out of business, I am Dr. Connie Terrell with Fresh Spirit Wellness for Women, and we are the oldest African-American founded organization in Harris County and the surrounding areas. And we do culturally specific services because, as the doctor was saying, so many times we have to educate them on being able to call the police and feeling safe and putting their safety at first. We also are, as she spoke about the 25th anniversary, we're honoring a celebration that Carmen, the lady that she just spoke about, the doctor spoke about. Carmen is one of the victims that we will be honoring in a candlelight celebration tomorrow. And you look at these guns. One of the other victims that's a client of ours, you heard her story on the news last year. Her daughter was celebrating her 1-year-old baby's birthday, came out because the abuser was outside, and she had the baby in her arms. He shot her and the baby. She died, the baby survived. He will be there tomorrow. Because this has to stop. Domestic violence is, as they said, a crime. I am not only just passionate because I am the only African-American founder in Harris County of a domestic violence agency, but I am also a survivor. So I did not just walk up and decide to do this, I lived it. And as one of the other ladies said, we have supporters that are doing their part. It is time for us to do our part. Emily at Hawk is doing her part. Fresh Spirit Wellness for Women, we're doing our part. It is time for the rest of the community to join all of us up here and do your part.
We cannot top that kind of passion, and thank you for your work. Let me just end, if you would, Sheriff, so that I think it is important to say, I almost want to bang my fist on this table because it's important to say that we are now on this day wearing purple. There's a young lady here that's indicated that she's pretty teed off. She's got another word there. She's pretty teed off about domestic violence. And it is a life and death matter. It is a matter that I really want these numbers, Chief, Sheriff, a combination. Let's thank Chief Finner as well because the Lieutenant is here, so let's thank Chief Finner. He has been an outstanding supporter. I gave $1 million to HPD on their victims' assistance, and we'll be looking forward to working with others. But gun violence killed more than 48,000 Americans, averaging 133 per day. It's important when we look at that, and then as we look at America, the use of guns are used in domestic violence. That's how I started, more than any weapon. This press conference is about the weapon of choice. And for all of those who want to, talk about many other sources of death, you're right. Poison, thrown off a building, run over by a car. We know people who want to kill can kill. But the easy access to a shotgun, a sawed-off shotgun, Harry's gun, call it, 9mm, I got them almost in my head, and the Ruger 380, and then the AR-15. Yes, mass shootings, but the easy access, and Sheriff, you were just so potent talking about if that's the last sound that you're hearing. But I'm going to say this. This little thing is small and maybe has a different kind of noise. What about the last thing you have is the shock that someone has a gun while you're in the midst of a emotional fight or continuous abuse, and they got one like this that you didn't see because maybe you would have run out with your children, but here this little one comes. Used in abuse situations. I don't think we can tolerate this anymore. Too many people dying. So I want to be reminded of the women who we mourn today and the families. I want to remind you that 11,000 women in the United States were killed with a gun between 2015 and 2019. I want you to know that firearms were used in 54.1% of domestic homicides. This is nationally defined as those committed by either an intimate partner or other family members. And every month, an average of 57 women are killed with a firearm by an intimate partner. So we speak for the nation. But what we can do tomorrow at 8 a.m. is bring your gun in. Don't let yourself be susceptible to your emotion, to a precipitative act, to make sure that you can, in fact, save a life by not using a gun. That's why we're here today, because we mourn those women who've lost their lives, who didn't get a chance to raise their children, who thought they could handle it themselves, who didn't want to call a law enforcement officer. I don't want them to go to jail. I know we can work it out. And here we are, because they have a gun. Maybe they could have worked it out. A beating is horrible. But maybe you might have lived. But that person had an access to an unfettered gun. They can just get it anywhere. Might have borrowed it from someone. And these are the ones that the Sheriff's Department have taken off the streets. Sheriff, I'm going to give you the last word. If anybody has a question, any of our gentlemen has a question.
En español puede ser. Si por lo que mañana van a hacer, si puede invitar a las personas.
Sí, mañana hay un programa en colaboración con la oficina del comisionador Ellis. La congresista también ha anunciado el programa, y con la ciudad de Houston, el alguacil Turner, donde van a dar fondos si alguien entrega armas. Ya hubo un evento, este es el segundo evento, entonces la recomendación es si alguien tiene un arma que ya no está utilizando, que es antigua, cualquier cosa que ya no la quiere aportar o tener, entonces mañana es esa oportunidad de ir y le van a dar, no sé cuál es lo que se le da, un certificado o algo de dinero, pero se le entrega en cambio de cada arma que es entregada. Entonces ella también está anunciando este programa.
¿Por qué es importante ese evento?
Es importante porque le damos al público la oportunidad de tener absorción de una manera segura, donde pueden entregar sus armas y sus deseos, y también recibe algo de recompensación por esa arma. Entonces por eso estamos aquí para anunciar el programa.
¿Eso va a cambiar algo de la violencia, el crimen?
No, pensamos que los que ya tienen una arma que la quieren entregar, pues es una manera eficaz de hacerlo.
Did you get it?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? So tomorrow at 8, working with the mayor, our fellow congresspersons, Green, Garcia, and Fletcher, and any others who we welcome. I have advocated for gun buyback programs for many, many years. I'm excited about what's happening. I see the next one in the county. But the message of this day is to indicate the tragedy that one could say should not happen and could be prevented. This family is not in a gang fight out on the street. Tragically, I hate road rage, but they're not in a road rage right now. They're in their homes. The woman in most instances, and I don't want to leave out domestic violence that involves children and men, is trying to make a peaceful home. Ms. Gutierrez was trying to visit a 5-month-old baby, her baby. And she is beaten and dragged at one time, charged with lying intoxication at another time, and this family now is suffering. And I want the family to know that if I'm speaking about it, it's because I'm really hurt for this family, for what happened to her, and Brittany, and other women who have suffered, and those who've been eloquent enough to speak of their own personal encounter with domestic violence. And then to add the gunshot wound, which, by the way, gunshot wounds and medical care, I think medical care is about 144,000. I want to give the statistics. Open it up. That's what I want to end on, because I'm trying to get the buy-in for people, Sheriff, who think that we are violating the Second Amendment. I want them to buy in to show up tomorrow, and I want them to buy in not to have guns when there's a volatile situation in the home. Tomorrow you can come without any questions asked, and we will continue to have that kind of gun buyback. Before I leave, I just want to give you these numbers. A gunshot and also a cut and stab totals $40 billion. So it's a total cost across America. These kinds of injuries, medical care, and $13 billion respectively in medical, public services, and work loss costs. And across medically treated cases, costs average for the survivor $154,000 and $12,000 for a stab survivor. Look at the difference. But it is no doubt for anybody that wants to save dollars, just take some guns out of our hands and stop the killing of women in domestic violence. And this last note, when you take away this parent, you take away a survivor for the children, you take away someone who's taking care of the children, you now have orphan children in many instances. And then what's going to happen? Let me express my appreciation for all of you, Family Services, the Houston Area Women's Center, Sheriff Gonzalez, thank you for caring and the work that your office has done. Sergeant, Deputy, thank you so very much. Sergeant White and Deputy Escobar. Doctor, thank you so very much. I want to make sure Wilson. And thank all the agencies, the precinct, Constable May Walker, 7, and of course Chief Finner, Lieutenant Cloud, and your agency, because you're not wearing a t-shirt.
I've had on a t-shirt every day this week.
But your agency,
Fresh Spirit Wellness.
Fresh Spirit Wellness for Women. I think we've told our story today, but I'm fired up because I just want this to stop. I really do. I just can't fathom. We all should be out of business when it comes to domestic violence. I have to appreciate picking guns up, but I'd like them not to have to do so. This is not the Second Amendment. This is not the legal carrying of guns. I don't think Sheriff Gonzalez is knocking on the door and getting anyone's gun stored well in their home. No one is trying to bother you stored well. You're not spitting fire. You're not holed up in your house with the gun, shooting out the window, or taking the life of your loved one. He's not bothering people like that are stored quietly in their home. I met someone in the airport, and he said in November he's going deer hunting. And he said his guns are stored somewhere way away, ready for him to go deer hunting. No one is bothering him. No one is asking him for anything. And he has them stored. We're looking for the violent criminal or the person that's going to kill somebody. And in this month, kill a woman. Kill a woman. Thank you all so very much.